Welcome to the Whole Farm Podcast, brought to you by CHONEX, where we explore soil health, nutrient management, and the systems that help crops and farms perform better over time. Each episode features conversations with growers and industry experts focused on practical insights you can apply in the field. Whether you're managing nutrients, building healthier soils, or looking for data-driven ways to improve outcomes, this podcast is built to support real decisions and real results.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Whole Farm Podcast brought to you by CHONEX. We have a very special guest today. I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend, someone I consider a mentor, which is just a huge blessing for me to say that out loud. But we have Mr. Gary Black joining us today. And usually we give a little introduction for our guest. But I thought it would be appropriate since Gary has worn many hats over the years and has a humongous track record of success and just things he's done. So I'm going to let Gary introduce himself for our audience. Go ahead, Gary.
Hey, good morning, Michael, and good morning, everybody. When Michael says I've worn hats, that's just a kind way of saying that I'm old. So I picked up on that real quick. Thank you everybody for joining. Really excited about the visit, and we're gonna have a good conversation this morning. And certainly we're pleased with the relationship with Chonex and the direction this company's going. And I think a lot of you as listeners and are the same way. Wow. I'm sitting here on Harmony Grove Farms in Commerce, Georgia, where I was raised, and it's been a blessing to be back here since 1993. Wow. And a good bit of my time of my career going back forth to Atlanta. We're 65 miles to dead downtown, and I did that trip a lot to the Capitol and later to the Georgia Department of Agriculture. But raised in an environment that was not my father was retired military. He never did farm for a living, but we always had cattle. I kind of got stuck on we're moving up here. High school counselor says, where do you live? And gave her the address. She said, you need to be an FFA. And I said, I couldn't spell FFA, much less understand what it was. And I was really kind of coaxed in it because I said, well, you can get a blue and gold jacket. And I said, well, everybody ought to have a jacket. So I was fortunate and had a great ag teacher mentor and came up through there. Wound up having a pretty good link with FFA over the course of time. And moved on, the University of Georgia, then had a chance to work 7 years at Georgia Farm Bureau with Young Farmer Leadership Activities, but later the Georgia Agribusiness Council. I was president for 21 years, and that's where doing a lot of stuff at the Capitol, a lot of stuff at Washington, and building hopefully building out several things. A company that's called AgriTrust of Georgia that we started literally from scratch, and I'm blessed to be back on that board. That's about a $50 million insurance company now, so pretty interesting. Never thought I had anything to do with elected office because I worked with all of them. And I used to say, I know what the underbelly of the thing looks like, and so I don't want to do it. But yet the Lord's tug on that and other encouragement. And so I ran unsuccessfully in 2005 and won out in a 4-person primary, but didn't beat the establishment in the fall. And I came back 4 years later. I was elected the Commissioner of Agriculture in the state of Georgia in 2010 and served to 2023. So now on-point strategies is what we do every day. My commute's a whole lot bigger. It's 45 seconds to my house. I can have lunch with my wife when she allows it. And, and then we still raise commercial and registered semi-Angus cattle here and just have a blast. But I'm proud of you, proud of what you're doing. And I know this partnership and working with this great company has been a lot of fun.
Well, there's a couple first that I want to point out, Gary, as far as guest on the podcast. You're the first real Georgian that we've had as a guest. So that's good. I mean, I guess I'm technically the host, and Sam Gray from CHONEX has been on here, and he's a part-time Georgian. And so but you're also the first person that served as a regulator of any way.
Yeah.
And so we talked a lot about having folks from the USDA on the podcast. I do have a feeling that we're going to have some friends from different industry segments that connect in different kinds of ways to potentially a regenerative conversation or maybe a more open-minded kind of mindset, agriculture mindset. So I think those are coming, but you're the first person that's been in that seat where you've had to lead people through guiding different practices of farming,
Yep.
different things that align with change of practices, or maybe even things that connect to conservation and how that's viewed broadly on the farm. And so that's a first. And now that you're out of that seat, it gives you the flexibility, I think, to look in reverse, but also looking ahead. We're going to talk about some of that. Um, but you made a joke that you did not know how to spell FFA. I find that super hard to believe because in my experience with you, you've been a person that's always done things to make people remember things. And
Mhm.
part of remembering things is coming up with creative ways for people to remember that. And so I think some of your speeches that I've heard or sat in the audience for, they contain acronyms and acrostics. And so you have a affiliation for these, and I've always wanted to see and just ask you, what are some of your favorite? Obviously, this is not part of a farming conversation. We're getting there, but tell me about some of your favorite acronyms and acrostics. It could be any topic, any subject.
Wow. Well, and I don't, yeah, well, if you will allow a little liberty with exact acrostics, they do help. It's purely because I have a very simple mind. So, I mean, I need simple things in order to understand them. So, uh, but I can take a little liberty. I'm really looking forward today. I've got a presentation a little later in Atlanta today with an academy that's been created by the Carl Vinson Institute of Government and at the University of Georgia. And this academy is to take senior level people in state government. And I think it's far more than just a leadership program. It obviously has leadership components, but what they're trying to do is actually teach people how to, how to do the better so that government will be better. I admire this, and I've got some really good people that are involved. I'm looking forward to talking to them at lunch today. But the topic today is looking forward through the rear view mirror. And my rear view mirror, an old fashioned rear view mirror off of a car, it used to have a little plug. You'd stick it under the windshield. Uh, that'll be the teaching tool today. And what we're going to do, the rear view mirror is going to involve about six lessons that I can of experience. It'll hopefully help them. But then the punchline comes at the end because the title starts with that, but it really don't say anything about it. And I hope they'll be like, what is this? Is weird, and why? Where's it? But the punchline comes at the very end. And the facts are, the rearview mirror is very useful, but it is affixed to another piece of glass that's called windshield. And the question will come at the end of that, which is bigger, the windshield, the rearview mirror? They're both useful, but we're going to use today some leadership lessons and suggestions of looking through the rearview mirror, but hopefully that'll position us to go forward. We're going to position ourselves in looking at the lessons of the past that'll prepare us for the future. And the future is where we have to be. That's what CHONEX is all about. It is the future. of and we're probably going to talk about some of those lessons of the past in a minute, uh, because we have learned a lot. That's a favorite one of mine, and uh, we're really going to look. I look forward to seeing what the response today is. I think it'll be good. Uh, you, if you'll remember, because we both spent some time at the Georgia Agribusiness Council, and one of the leaders there for a long time was a very simple guy. His name was Bill Baisley. He was in the poultry industry. I remember very clearly in 1992, because GAC was about broke. We were trying to figure out how do we survive, build membership, do the kind of things. So it was before we started the insurance company, AgriTrust, and we were strategic planning, whatever discussion and make them. And Bill Besley just simply said, "I'll tell you what, guys, what we really need is something big." And Bill did not say something big. Bill said something big, SUMPIN, BIG. And still today, there's the something big scholarship at GAC because there was a challenge to think of something big. And we thought of something big. We started now what's $50 million insurance company. And so, I think you're right. Those simple things, I love those things. I love the play on words. I love, again, one of our discussions today, and I'll wrap up with this. One of these points today, I wonder if everybody had ever thought about this. Do you know? I suggest to you that in my life, I can tell you, no, no. Did you know that no almost always will prevent oh no? That's kind of a crazy thing, you know. And that's a word of integrity. Those you're protecting yourself, your family, whatever your principles that you have in your business. But if I can think back over my career, and every time I had to say, "Oh no," it would have been prevented had I said no to start with. And that's a key principle that because your yes really doesn't mean anything until you learn how to say no. And so I love having fun with stuff like that, Michael, and hopefully it'll sink. It'll speak to somebody.
Well, I'm gonna let that cast the framework over this entire conversation because there's three things that I would like to tap into that you mentioned as ways to remember this because you mentioned the rear view versus the windshield.
Uh,
We're going to probably hit that first because that is a great visual for some of the conversations I'm sure we're going to get into. Then you mentioned something big. And I really, going back to what I mentioned about an open mindset in agriculture, almost like a reset, not or a reconstruction of some of our thoughts. I've had a lot of thoughts about deconstruction versus reconstruction. A lot of people think we're tearing things down in agriculture all the time, but maybe we don't need to look through a deconstruction mindset. We need to look through a reconstruction mindset. So something big ties into that because I think we're into this mindset where we can maybe think outside of what we've done in the past. Something big is right there. And also the last part is what you mentioned on no. I think it's so powerful. And I cannot wait to get some of your thoughts around how that applies to the time and the space that we're in with agriculture. Because I do
Yep.
think that we're getting into some conversations where people have lots of feelings because they're starting to think about things to not do versus things that they could do. And that's a big I think in my opinion, that's a big mental shift. And
Yep.
so let's start with this rear view versus windshield first. And I want to talk about the change because there's some changes happening right now in agriculture, but let's look in the rear view first. So, in
Mhm.
your opinion, talk to me about the rear view. How do you frame what you've seen from, let's just say, the 1990s? We'll think in threes. The 1990s versus the 2000s to the 2010s, where we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me start going back two dates that are earlier that I think your list. I wonder if anybody's ever heard, or I think it'd be useful because I think and by the way, these first two, I would like to point out that I was not around during that time, contrary to popular belief. Uh, Early 1920s, do you know that the horsepower of America, do you know that 25% of our corn, of our feed grains, 25% in 1920 of what we produced in America was simply for feeding horses? So uh, we only had access to human consumption, trade, everything, 3 out of every 4 bushels of anything that we produced, because the rest of it was going to fill the draft power, the first understanding of what horsepower was. You fast forward real quickly, you talk about times of innovation and how quickly it changed. What's the year in American history? I think it's the most pivotal statistic in American agriculture of what year on American farms, to a lesser extent, we would have been a little bit behind in Georgia, but over the course of in America, what year were there more tractors on American farms than there were horses and mules? That year's 1954. Only 1954. That's 4 years before I was born. So when I was born, there were still people using draft animals. Crazy to think about. So then, that's what you got to look at from 1954, then to get to 1990, and you say, oh my word, what happened? You're talking about 36 years? Only, and that's where my career kind of kicked in 1980. So we're talking about from not my goodness, 26 years before the start of where we just thought we were fancy pants everything in 1990. All our tech and new stuff coming on with biotech and everything, and all our big tractors and everything. What? My word, 26 years before, half of the country still used horses and mules. So that's amazing. I came along at the time when every if you had a cap, if you had a K brand cap, K products cap, with the Richardson cap sort of looks like that now. Everybody out there, I hope everybody understands what I'm saying. That K brand cap, I bet it's built on the same frame. But that K brand cap, if you had a cap from every chemical company and every seed company and every fertilizer company and every equipment company in America, and they all had K-brand caps. If you had one of their caps, you'd have to get you another room because you couldn't put all those caps in one room. Where just comparatively speaking, today you can almost have like one large hat rack and get everybody's cap on it because it's consolidated. It's that everybody's. That's amazing. People, I've got friends that are now in their 60s, and my work, I guess they probably work for, but they've been in the business and had the same customers, probably worked for 27 different companies because how it's collapsed, and you can't ever tell who they were. They're still working. I'm glad to see some of them are still working, but you don't know who they're working for. You see. I think it's important over that period of time, Michael, even going back to the 50s, to understand our producer friends. I don't know anybody that doesn't want to do better. I don't anybody that doesn't want to improve their practices. Nobody gets up in the morning and say, how can I go out here today and screw up? Nobody does that. Uh, uh, Sometimes we're slow at adoption, but we learn and agriculture adapts, and so I've seen a lot of that adaptation, and but now we are in another period of it. That's You said reset a minute ago or something. It'll be interesting to see how what now now that we can take these lessons of the rear view mirror and get into the windshield a little bit. What's that going to look like? But it's you know I, we've seen obviously farmers get a little older, a little hesitancy for younger people. Then I've seen that. I've seen the advent of this discussion of, oh my goodness, we're losing, you know, we want rural economic development, we want rural jobs, but now wait a minute, we got to preserve farmland too. We want to adapt today to solar energy and all that. But wait a minute, we've got to and there's these competing forces that are very interesting to watch them. But certainly we're still blessed to live in a place where we're on the cutting edge of the things that we'll see in the windshield, and we're able to be more productive than ever before. And that's we better not ever lose sight of that, because there's no doubt about that. If we want to talk about what made America great again, or what made America great to start with, it's folks listening to this podcast and their families who lived through all this change.
Man, you kind of said something that I heard yesterday, but I heard it in a different way when you just said it, because you're right. I grew up uh, going, and one of my first, my non-father mentors as far as men was a man named Greg Crumley in Tata, Georgia. And I grew up going to his one of his hunting lodges and seeing his hat collection. Now his hat collection went around the entirety of his hunting lodge twice, and it was one nail for every hat. So he had probably 500 nails, and it went around in duplicate, is what it seemed like. I mean, two rows of hats around the whole thing. And so you're right. And to think about the consolidation, and you slipped and you said collapsed. Because honestly, when it was chemistry 30 years ago, it was consolidation. People kind of specialized, and then it kept getting, folded into one another. And now we're seeing these biological companies. I would liken that to as many hats in the room as what I remember seeing at that hunting lodge. There were so many hats. I feel like that on biologicals right now. I heard one of my dear friends, Dr. Trey Cutts from Title Grow AgriScience. I heard him say on a podcast yesterday that where will we be in 5 years? It will be an 80% less of the companies in the biological space that will be functioning. And that might be more of a mechanism of collapse versus consolidation. And I think that's because of market maturity. Dr. Trey did a really good job talking about that. And shout out to Dr. Cutts on that. He's a good UGA grad, good bulldog, good friend of ours. And so I do want to say that we're in a cycle. If you look through the windshield versus looking in the rear view, we're in a kind of space that has happened before. I've heard before, and
Yeah.
I know you've heard this, Mr. Gary, that history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that, especially when it comes to how we're seeing that chemistry movement versus this biological movement. And so, from your perspective, that's a lot of change. Where else do you see this kind of farm economy changing over the next 3 to 5 years if you're looking through the front windshield?
Okay. Uh, it's always important. I look back as uh, we have our messaging is we've got to really do a little forensic work on our messaging, I believe, moving forward. I can think about some of the speeches I made as a 17-year-old with a blue and gold jacket on. I mean, they're all true. There probably some of them are still relevant today, but the problem is some of we can't ever get off message, but sometimes we say the same message for such a long period of time, and it makes me wonder if we ever make progress. Because I'm like, wait a minute, this is the same daggum things I've been saying for 30, 40 years, and I'm not getting through. We can't give up on that. The demographics continue to change. Uh, there are fewer members of state elected legislators who further, whether they have, I mean, having any agricultural experience, plus us actually being farmers. We're blessed here in Georgia. Hallelujah, that the two chairman of the House Agriculture Committee and the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee in the Georgia General Assembly are both still large farmers. So, I mean, that's probably still pretty is going to get worse, not the norm. Same with members of Congress. Uh, uh, so that's still an ever-present challenge of what do we do to take our voice, our building relationships with decision makers and keeping them and keeping in integrity and trust and the because us having intentional strategic decisions about agriculture is just fundamental to the country. It's fundamental to our national defense. It's fundamental to the health and safety of our families. So the messaging thing, I think, the next 5 years will continue to just be, if you're involved in Farm Bureau, if you're involved in your whatever group that you're in, whatever your commodity association, I've got a word for you that sometimes those meetings might be long, sometimes they might be boring, and sometimes you might wonder whether you're ever getting anything done. But I'm going to tell you what, going back home and sitting at home behind the farm gate is not going to do you any good. The importance of us being beyond the farm gate in these next, forever is that's part of the responsibility of being in our business. So I say that as that deal, just making the decisions too of, am I going to be more commodity? There will be people. There'll be people on listening to this podcast, maybe trying to make the decision today. Did I stay in the commodity business, or did I get in the food business? Do I stay big? Do I try to pull down and control costs and try to go medium or small? If I'm in the commodity business, that means I've got to be concerned about what India wants to buy, or I'm going to pull back and say, you know what, I got I got 6 million. I got 6 million people in Atlanta that eat. So should I pull back if I'm going to be involved in agriculture? Should I pull back and go local? I think that's a pretty good suite of challenges over the next 5 years that I think people will be making.
Man, okay. So I'm going straight into this next question because you mentioned about farmers' thought process, but you also mentioned about the public interest. Where do you see that going based on what we've heard in the media versus just what you're starting to see in the grocery store and what's really getting talked about out loud?
Right outside the door behind me, a young lady from the Gainesville Times showed up the day after I got elected in 2010, and she had this very obvious question. Hey, introduce whatever. First question I answered from a press person. and I didn't have the Lord provided it. I didn't plan to say it. It was back here, but I didn't plan to say it. But she says, "What are you going to change? What's your first step? Is replacing somebody who's been there 42 years? What's the first step?" And this, without hesitation, I said, it all revolves around one word. It was actually three things. She said, "What?" I said, "The word is trust." She said, "Trust?" Like she was wanting me to come up with some 17-point initiative, some. I said, "No. The first step is this. I got to go in there and I got to earn their trust. Number two, they got to earn mine. But number three, the biggest part of my job, as long as I have the chance to serve, is we're going to equip people and teach them to trust each other. Because see, if that team will trust each other, there's this unlimited possibilities what we can accomplish. If you don't have any trust, I think manufactured, real, suspected, envisioned, whatever. You could put all those on a scale right now about our food system, and they're all over the board. But we have a trust issue. When people see recalls of lettuce, and it's got nothing to do with our producers, but it's got everything to do with imports, but it destroys everybody's marketplace. And what we don't realize is actually, I don't know in this particular case, but it is highly possible that some of the people that our domestic growers produce for, you got to realize that those same have vested interests beyond our borders, and that brand, one way or the other, is produced somewhere. But when it doesn't meet the standards of what we're accustomed to, then all of a sudden our producers are the ones that pay the bill. And I've been chapped about that for a long time. But see, the consumer doesn't know. They just wait a minute. I'm going to back off from all of it, and that when there's a compromise, our product, our system is the best in the world, but still it's not perfect. And then we get mixed messages of everybody believing everything that's on the internet about every company, about what everybody did, about what any farmer did, and that's standard practice. And then all of a sudden we're more reliant on the keyboard and the screen than we are about, like putting good stuff in our mind and actually intellectually being able to process that. So is this real or not? That's hurting us. And that trust, everything we could possibly do to maintain the trust, build the relationships, again, whether that's with government officials, regulators, our neighbors, our customers, that's just that's a huge challenge today, Michael, and I'm concerned about it. And I hope our commodity associations and each of us as producers are going to be doing everything possible to shore up that trust.
That is really important today to hear, just because I would say that the going back to what you said, that we still have connectivity in policy and legislative bodies to the farm. We still have leaders that are farmers. A long time ago, you had people that were neighbors that were farmers. Now, you might not have the same capacity of where you live at. You might not drive by a farm on the way to your grocery store. You may not see a farm in unless you're traveling to the beach. There's a disconnect between that farmer who is a person and the consumer who is also a person. And so that makes a lot of sense to me that you said, we have a trust issue, because the truth is you trust people many times and your interactions with people over systems. And so if you're,
Thank goodness the general public still trusts farmers more than they do Congress. But it's a but we've still got a little work to do.
That's right. So let's talk about that work. So if you had some advice for the farmers that might be listening, or the producers, the growers, the interested stakeholders in the farm community, what kind of advice would you get them to restore some of that trust?
Some of that's pretty is I think is pretty obvious. It's again, I don't think nobody listening to this wakes up in the morning trying to say, how can I mess up today? It's not that. But uh, I did an interview with a young man several years ago, unfortunately, because I think it may come to this is having a really good understanding of why you do what you do. Everything starts with why, and if you can define your why I'm in this, that sets you on a trajectory to be the first step towards success in any profession. But I think particularly what we're facing now in agriculture. Uh, we had a Congressman Doug Collins and I went into uh, in Northeast Georgia. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. We had a pretty significant, not a hydrologic drought, but it was a severe agriculture drought. So the bottom line, it just didn't rain. And we don't have near as much cropland up here in Northeast Georgia as we used to, but it was challenging pastures. And we were burned up here. I mean, it was rough. So we decided to have, can't do much to have a public hearing or, try to listen to people. So Congressman Collins and I got together in North Georgia and listened to folks. And, about the only you got, nobody wants to hear, well, we can file it, declare a disaster, and then we got access to more SBA loans. I mean, that doesn't help. Better than nothing, I guess. But well, there's one kid who still had some row crops, and he didn't come to the meeting, but then he took the time over the next week or so to preach my funeral and Doug's on Facebook. And parenthetically, can I look at y'all and say, look, that's one thing we all need to do is get off the daggum keyboard. Keyboard courage doesn't solve any problem. Because keyboard courage, what I mean by that is what you will say by typing keys that you would never say to your neighbor face to face. And it's got to stop. It's poison. It's toxic. Thank you. You're welcome. No one wanted that today, but close parentheses. We said, okay. I told my folks, I said, find this dude. And I tell you what, we have pretty good relations with the anchor station in Atlanta. They cover the ABC affiliate, WSB. Let's get our friends, let's go up there and see him. And let them tell the story. We can do that. We pulled it off. Folks, we got up there on Saturday morning, my comms director, Julie McPhee, and as thank the Lord as it would provide, we're going into a bunch of corn and beans that are just burned, slapped up. But it's raining cats and dogs. We get in the barn. We sit the young man down, mic him up. The interview starts, says, how you doing? Fine. And tell me your name, blah, 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 blah. Could you tell us how, I know it's been a rough year. Could you tell us a little bit about it? They looked dead in the camera. He says, bad. That's all he said. And because the interviewer said, well, how bad? And the answer was real bad. And we said, wait a minute, let's cut just a minute. We got a chance to talk about this now. Maybe we ought to talk about it. Then here's the why question I'm getting to. The interviewer looks at it and it says, well, this is tough, and understanding the young farmer and all this is, why did you decide to choose this profession? The sad answer was, I didn't want to go to school. That was it. And I'll tell you what, folks, that may be some folks' answer, but I'm telling you, that's not a good one. That is not a good why. And if we want to build trust, we better understand what why is. What is my why proposition? Because I'm a God-called producer of food and fiber. And I stay up late and I work and I do this because I'm called to do this. And And the last exclamation point on that, Michael, is we talked about food and commodities just real briefly a while ago. Even if you're in the commodity business, even if we're going, and that winds up being some folks in our business like to slight others by calling them a commodity producer, and I reject that, and I think that's harmful to agriculture. But what I do believe is that we all ought to recognize regenerative, conventional, small, big, medium, large, doesn't matter. We are all producers of food and fiber. And that food and fiber is consumed by a consumer who may live next door to us or who may live on somewhere where a container ship, it takes 45 days for our products to get there. Our stuff may wind up being in a bottle, in a tube, or it may come in in an ocean going vessel in containers or bulk ships. But the bottom line is, if we put forth our effort every day as a producer of food, that changes the perspective. That's what I think.
That's a lot to unpack in a good way. And I am thankful that you answered it that way because, my question is going to be for growers and farmers and folks that support growers and farmers that have been in this a long time. Maybe they look at this economy just like that young person looked at the drought. It's very right now, and they might be feeling pretty worn out. They might be feeling worn out, beat down, whatever kind of descriptive you want to put into that thought process. So, what advice, given all the changes that are happening in the outside world right now, what advice for these farmers that are feeling worn out, feeling beat down, maybe they need something big? What kind of thoughts would you recommend to get them into a mindset that's more windshield looking versus even just looking outside of the car and seeing where they are right now? Because sometimes I do feel like the why just becomes so hard for these farmers to find.
Mhm.
The ones I talk to,
Mhm.
the ones you talk to, the ones that call us and are our friends, our neighbors that talk to us. So, what advice would you get them into a mindset that would be more an open mindset on some things that might help them?
Okay, I'm blessed with a little bit of experience, and you can pull from those kind of things. Maybe some of these rear view mirror concepts that are helpful. But in the context of the question you just asked, I would be remiss in saying and looking and pleading with everybody that was listening. I just read it this morning. Uh, the book of James in the New Testament is a great book. The whole book's a great book, greatest book ever written. But James pleads with people in the first chapter that if any man lacks wisdom, uh, he can ask the Heavenly Father for it. The Lord Jesus is there, ready and willing, and that relationship is most important. And I would argue if that one's not square, then a lot of other things get real goofy, and they don't. So that's step one. I can tell you right now, even if you're simple and don't want to, I'm trying to figure this thing out. I can promise you. Uh, God help me understand is a very simple prayer, but the Lord is faithful. That's step one, Michael. If particularly facing all these challenges, and because there's not that answer to your why is not found in the creed of a commodity association. It's these other fundamental things that happen. Then, but then when you get into okay, I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Then what have I got to do? You got to just the intentional monitoring of costs, the intent, the you know, understanding where I want to go with my marketing, making that intentional decision of, let's said a while ago, eh, have we got to stay small? Have we got to stay big, or can we can we pull things back and do the same thing with less? Can we? I'm sitting out here. I'm frustrated. I know some people say, well, I just think my soul's worn out. I can't get as much out. Well, that's where this whole regenerative traction is that you see, and you say, wait a minute, can we be more productive doing less? Can we change some of these other fundamental things that wind up improving? Then I feel better about what I'm doing, and then I build a future for my children. And that's certainly some of the things we're trying to answer at CHONEX. Is there a better way? And so assessing that path forward in the windshield is a is 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 going to be really key to, I think, most of our listeners, and maybe that's why they're listening to start with.
Man, I think so. And well, I pray that. But Mr. Gary, I want to ask you because you just gave some really, you gave some wisdom that was written in, you and I have probably talked about this before. James's letter, it's really the first letter that's chronologically written that is actually in the Bible. But you've probably had that thought yourself. And if we looked at the mirror, if you could, sometimes it's easy for us to say things that we ought to be doing, but we learn those things because we did do those things or we did experience that. And so,
Yeah.
how does that apply to your own operation, your own life as we look through? And I know you and I have both prayed that prayer.
Yeah.
God, give us wisdom for these things, where we are, where we want to be at, how do we fit in your will? Give, if you could describe a moment that for yourself, because I think the audience would really identify with that. And I would love to hear kind of your own experience with if you felt worn out before like that.
Oh me. Yeah, a couple real quick. The fundamental part of that, Michael, is being 48 years old and having a young man go down front that I thought I needed to help at church. And he finally asked me, I said, what's wrong? He said, I don't know if I'm saved. And I gasped because I'd struggled with the same question. And it wasn't until that night when I'd asked the Lord to hold me accountable, and he did. And his basic message was, you can do all this kind of stuff and be real busy. But what you really need, he said, I love you and I want a relationship with you, but you got to yield everything. Well, that was May 18th, 2008. That's the first step. But when you feel worn out, sometimes thinking, is this where I'm supposed to go? I had one political story where, I mean, saying, am I doing the right thing? Am I, is this the right, is this the right step? I can remember being in front of, being scared to death and some stuff, and the music comes to your mind that he knows my name, so I'm not going to be left aside. That's a good thing. Uh, uh, I can remember one key decision that we had to make, and my wife and I counseled together, and that's where at our breakfast counter, she said, I do not want to go to Nineveh. And you remember that's where God called Jonah to go. He said, get thee up and go to Nineveh, which is, it was like going to the other side of the world, or going to this. But see, my wife then said, but I also do not want to be in the belly of a whale. So we then we started taking the proper journey to Nineveh and never looked back. And it was tough. There were lots of things, but I have zero regrets. That's for sure. We did the right thing. So all of that is personal. All of it is spiritual. It's not, there's not a magic uh, agriculture phrase that solves all our problems. I think we have to. I think we've long needed to go back to the fundamentals that we kind of collectively think that rural America stands for. But we would be. I think that would be a great first step. But you know, the other things that we learn over time, Michael, is tenacity. Do not do not ever give up on the notion of saying what if. I want a what if moment every day. I want the I I want the demons when I get up every morning to say, "Uh-oh, he's up." I want the morning to be scared to death when we get up and see if we would all position ourselves as I said, it's tough. Yeah, everything's tough, and I'm not being cavalier about some of the challenges many of our friends are facing. But the way to meet those challenges is to be armored up and don't lose the capacity to dream and and then pin pin your ears back and go.
Mm. I hate making those noises. It sounds like a commercial. It's like when you walk into your favorite biscuit place and you smell that
Mm,
that's where I just feel like what you just said takes me. Just because you and I both know you mentioned armor and the armor goes on the front, it does not go on the back. And also, if I really love this, I learned this recently. You probably already know this, but when the Roman soldiers would actually fight, they were not meant to necessarily fight one on one. They were meant to be together in a formation. They called it the testudo formation,
uh-huh.
which was like a turtle shell, which I thought was awesome. My kids love turtles. I have an acquired wild pet turtle. I don't know how he's still alive, but I think about that formation. It requires more people than just one. And when you
Mhm.
band together and you are aligned and you can be with other people, I think that's very important. But I also think about running forward, that armor's on the front. And I just kind of want to tie this all back in as kind of a final thought. Your beef cattle operation. What kind of things are you thinking about looking at? Just open to as far as discussing where you're headed on your
Yeah,
farming operation and how does that relate to forward?
yeah, we're really excited about it because we're doing a better job than we've ever done. I mean, I spent 40 years running all over everywhere and having we had always had pretty decent genetics, but not. And then we just kind of got to stuff, keep the nutrient plan work. You know, but I've got more time now. And my son, your friend, is y'all been working on some. Uh, I can see us doing a lot more crowd grazing in the coming year. Uh, I can see us. I'm on the. There was this land here had so much chicken litter put on it over the course of time that my soil test requires a second piece of paper to record all the phosphorus. So I got to figure out how to get that more usable. And our so I'm really excited about that. We're already seeing we've got pretty good diversity with fescue and common Bermuda grass and crabgrass, but we really are trying to get much better. And if we look at revenue, I mean, my word. I mean, I got 26 mama cows. It's just, it's not, but what we do correctly. But our embryo work and our genetic plan is working, it's kind of freaky what our revenue was last year. Um, it's taking more time. But it's not, it's getting beyond that thing. Well, I'll take a, you and I know a lot of people, and that's not everybody's got their own deal now. But for us, it can't be well just dropping calves all during the year, and when you need a couple $1,000, you take two 400-pound bulls to the side. You're gonna that there's no way to make. We're gonna try to make some. You know, we're getting to the point where we can actually make a little money and use that to help pay for vacation and pay for the input bills and buy a piece of equipment and actually have a little something left over. And so that's what our goals are. But I'm excited. If it's the first step, and it is kind of the first regenerative steps that we want to take that we're very interested in.
Well, I think one thing I want to call out is you asked a question as far as, what can we do to help with phosphorus? That's a really important thing is to be able to know that there's a question to be asked. And you also mentioned that you have maybe not the solution, but you know some things going back to one of your very first statements. You know what you should say no to. And
Yeah.
there is a part of that that also plays in with creating a plan because you get to say, what do I need to say no to? What do I get to continue to do? And then what things can I change? And because sometimes if we're just talking about this worn out mindset, this kind of uh, this change of practice, if you will, some of that we don't even know what practice to change unless we say we're going to maybe stop doing something. And
Yeah.
so and once again, you mentioned that you had a piece of data that said that you had too much phosphorus or you had so much phosphorus that it was on the second page. Once again, if you do not take that test, if you do not take a first step to create some data where you can ask questions and find out if you're doing a good job, that's been part of this podcast is we want to have experts uh, that can influence us, that can show us some thoughts and some ideas that help us create better questions. And there's no doubt in my mind that you've given our minds, our hearts, and more importantly, our spirits and our souls a lot to be able to ask those questions with today, to get in the right mindset, because it's a mindset that's open, but it's a prosperous mindset. It's not necessarily a guarantee that we're going to be successful, but how do you create traction?
Yeah. Here's a simple way to do that, Michael. And maybe we could put a bow on our conversation this morning. For everybody that is trying in that search, I've found a little key thing several years ago, and it was amazing how we did it at the department. I've helped other groups do this, and everybody, well, we're gonna have a strategic plan. Okay, well, and then we're gonna get, and everybody's got them, and then they wind up putting them on the shelf and don't use them. Here's a simple way to do this, and it addresses this whole how you make a decision making make what is the decision making process for the windshield, and it's three simple concepts. It's first, if everyone listening today would say, what do I do well? And that's, you need to make that list. If you want to find out where your why, I'm sold out on my why. I know what my why is, but here's my plan. My windshield plan is, what do I do best? What do I do well? And the second thing is, what do I need to improve upon? What are those lists? Because whoa, wait a minute, I like doing that, but well, we really need to do a better job on that. But the third one is absolutely the most important one, and that third one is, what I need to stop doing. And I'm gonna tell you what, if you answer those simple questions, you'll have a windshield plan, and it will rock your life, because the most correct, and it takes a lot of courage to do the third one. That's where the no, when my concept of no is almost, I don't want that to be negative. It's actually it's actually essential. It's very positive. But that's my last challenge. And from a windshield point of view, what I do well, what I need to improve on, what I need to stop doing. I'm getting to the bottom of that. You'll be ready to go. I'll say this, Michael, and I'm sure maybe it's our team puts it in there. But if there's anything that's been said today, if you want to fuss at me, I'll take it. I've been the things maybe you got to say. Let me tell you what you do well, what you need to improve upon. Well, send me an email, or what you need to stop doing. But if I can help you about any of these things, if you got a personal story, you need somebody to listen to you. My email is Gary, Gary, at onpointstrategies.us. And be no greater joy in my life if I got an email today saying, "Hey, I got something I need you to pray about." If you do that, I'll pray. We'll stand beside you. But we hope we can serve you from CHONEX's point of view too, help you get to those next levels. And it's been an honor to be here.
Wow. Thank you so much, Gary, for your time today. A lot of people, I know he mentioned Chonex as us. Chonex is absolutely blessed to have Gary Black as one of our advisors as far as where we need to be touching this conversation and how do we need to be asking the right questions and creating solutions for some of these problems. So I just want to say his email will be in the show notes. He's serious. If you had heard the stories about Gary Black that I've heard for the past 25 years, he wants an email. And so I'm just so thankful for your time today, Mr. Gary. Thanks for joining us on the Whole Farm Podcast and wishing you guys a very blessed day.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Farm Podcast by CHONEX. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone in your network. For resources or to learn more about CHONEX, visit chonex.ag. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.